Louis Kevin Celestine, also known as Kaytranada, was born in Haiti in 1992, moving to Canada pretty soon after he was born. I read that growing up, he didn't have the easiest time in school and was even bullied, and he also struggled with depression, which he attributed in part to struggling with his sexuality. His family didn't work in entertainment, but he did grow up producing music starting as a young teenager. And though Kaytra's family wasn't in entertainment, his family, especially his dad and aunt, they still really loved music, so he grew up around a lot of older hip-hop records and things, which he fell in love with. When his parents divorced, he was about 14 at the time, and he eventually ended up dropping out of school to DJ and support his family. And altogether, there were 4 kids, so Kaytranada, his brother, and then 2 sisters. And his younger brother, you actually may know him because he's Lou Phelps. And I read that he's the person who introduced Kaytra to the software that he first used to produce his music.
J'ai mon laptop, mon père m'a acheté un laptop. Je faisais tout dans ma chambre, dans le sous-sol. Je partageais la chambre avec mon frère. Jusqu'à temps que j'avais 25 ans, je peux pas mentir ça. On faisait tous nos albums dans cette chambre-là. Beaucoup de monde venait chiller aussi. C'était vraiment un celestic dungeon. On était vraiment inspirés, mais depuis qu'on était petits, on rappait sur beaucoup d'instrumentales avec voice recorder. Tu sais, il y avait le petit micro, puis on jouait le beat fort, et puis on rappait sur le micro.
It's a pretty common story for the 2010s, but Kaytra started uploading his music to SoundCloud, initially under the name Kaytradamas. It's been obvious to me that Kaytranada is just not his name, but I always wondered where the stage name or names, I guess, came from. And his middle name is Kevin, like I mentioned, and so that's where the K, Kaytra, comes from. And apparently at the time, that Damas suffix, obviously like Nostradamus, it was popular. I mean, I've seen it a few times in the wild. And he just didn't want to be assumed to be associated with those other producers just because of similar stage names. And so the nada, as it does in Spanish, doesn't really mean anything, and Kaytranada has said maybe if he could go back and redo it, he would just call himself Kaytra. Everything changed when he uploaded a remix of Janet Jackson's If. He said that he only had about 1,000 SoundCloud followers at the time, but he uploaded the remix, went to sleep, and then woke up to a bunch of notifications.
Plein de notifications dans mon téléphone, comme plein de notifications SoundCloud, puis j'étais comme, moi dans ce temps-là, j'avais comme 1000 followers, je recevais pas de notifications de même. Puis là, je ne comprenais pas, j'étais comme, ok, ouais. Go back to sleep, parce que je dormais jusqu'à 4 heures dans le temps. Puis là, après, tu vois que les YouTube channels ont post, ça a rendu ça populaire, le monde était comme, oh, c'est qui lui? Ça m'a emmené en tournée à mon premier show à Halifax.
And it's really cool when you see artists who found their sound, so to speak, early, because I did not know Kaytranada at this time. I found out about him a little bit later. So I don't think I'd ever heard this remix. So I listened to it and it's very much his vibe. And even though his sound is definitely evolved, you hear a second of this and you're like, that's Kaytranada. I'm not sure if his process is different for every remix, but he said in a 2020 interview that to come up with the production for this If remix, he listened to Janet's acapella version of the song for like 8 months on end, so the production is crafted around that acapella version. I've never given it a thought, so I'm not sure if this is a common technique that's used for remixes, but it was interesting to read. Obviously, those house beats are very him, but so are those claps and that punctuating bass. I said this about a song of his that came out last year, but again, it's true here. Kaytranada understands negative space, and that syncopation really is signature for him. There are tiny points of silence or just less percussion, but it gives you just enough space to like miss it a little bit. But of course, all of this is happening so quickly that you don't really notice it. And I think that's why his music sucks you in really quickly, because it feels like a pulse. It's constant, it's stable, but it's not at all boring. And something else that was mentioned by a lot of articles that I didn't necessarily think of at the time is that Kaytranada's music also would have especially stood out in around 2013, 2014, because a lot of the electronic music, EDM, dubstep, a lot of it was focused on waiting for that big drop. So it might just be this one major moment in a song, or maybe you hear it 2 or 3 times. But rather than the song kind of just going on a continuous journey from point A to point B, you're kind of waiting for this rise and fall rather than maintaining a more constant upbeat pace. Kaytra said that it was this If remix that got him his first official DJ gig after so many other YouTube accounts also reposted it. And after that, everything basically changed. He was everywhere online, and there are several performances you can obviously find, like his Montreal Boiler Room set. Just wanna be your girl. And he was also making music with his brother at the same time under the name The Celestics, and they released an album called Supreme Laziness. This was their last album together, but Lou and Kaytra do still work together. Like, for example, Lou put out an album a couple months ago, and Kaytra's an executive producer. It was in 2014 that Kaytranada signed to XL Recordings, which was his first major label. And because he blew up so quickly, he was doing a bunch of shows, collaborating with a bunch of artists, but it didn't leave him much time to work on his own debut album.
Really? So when you were living in Montreal, you were really into the French scene?
Yeah. Like back in 2008, I was also listening to hip hop on the side. I come from more hip hop, but I was really like, just for discovering Justice, like I really like got interested like in that sound. Like Sebastian's my favorite in there. Like Sebastian is very underrated.
Sebastian.
But the problem was his management wanted him to stay on the road and keep building that momentum, meaning doing those shows and those remixes. And this is something that Kaytranada has said has bothered him and made him more depressed because he wanted to be known as an artist who created original songs in addition to the DJing and remixing. And it was around this time that he came out to his family the second time while home from touring. The first time I read, he was a teenager and he'd come out to his family as bisexual and they all just kind of brushed it off. No one really acknowledged it, so it wasn't something that was really spoken about. And I believe at this point he had also realized that he was gay. And just with the depression, being on the road, things being intense with his family, he explained, I just snapped. Something inside me was like, wait the fuck up. I felt like there were two people inside me. I was trying to be somebody I was not, and I was frustrated that people didn't know who I was. And his brother Lou said that he was worried about how the family would take his coming out since they're Haitian, and their mother at least is Catholic, but their mom was supportive in the end. And based on the interview where I read those, which is from Fader, it doesn't seem like there was an official coming out post or announcement or anything, and Kaytra just said at this point he hadn't told his father and was treating that Fader interview in part like the ripoff of a Band-Aid. I'm almost entirely sure the first Kaytranada song I'd ever heard was The Internet's Girl. And this song came out in 2015, and it's from the Internet's album Ego Death. It's a slower, more atmospheric song, but again, you've got that heavy percussion, some fluttering keys and synths, and you definitely feel like you're in a cloud of smoke. It's this very sultry song where Sid is kind of like, girl, with your partner, what the others won't do, I will, just say the word. It would be the year following, in 2016, that Kaytra finally put out his debut album, 99.9%. I'm assuming the title is based on his own emotional journey because he said in that Fader interview that I mentioned, I've been sad my whole life, but fuck that. I know I have good things ahead. I don't know, honestly, if I'm fully 100% happy, but I'm starting to get there. And on it is what I'm going to assume is still like the Kaytranada song in a sense, and that is You're the One.
You know I do. I'll give you my heart and the rest is up to you.
And this song actually features Sid from the internet who's singing, of course, and I love when artists do little trade-off collabs for their albums. This song is everything. It's hip-hop, it's house, it's synthy, it's euphoric. And I love how for years now, you see any group of like black people enjoying themselves, especially if it's an edit, this song might be playing in the actual video or it's going to be overlaid at some point in the edit. I've even heard people say, oh, when I hear the song outside, that's when I know that spring or summer has begun. This is one of those songs where you just hear it immediately and you want to grab someone's hand and rush to the dance floor. It genuinely is one of those ones you can't get enough of it, and the lyrics actually do mirror that, with Sid singing about this non-committal girl who has her entranced, likely to her own detriment, but she's hot, so who cares?
You got a face that I just can't say no to.
And obviously, this song is not going to hurt you, do you dirty or anything, but I like how Sid is describing the sort of pull this girl has over her. That's the pull that a Kaytranada beat that has got over me. And the video is very nostalgic, intentionally so because it's meant to harken back to late 90s, early 2000s black sitcoms. And I have been rewatching a bunch lately just for like comfort because it is unmatched. And this video does a really good job of recreating those colorful, warm, but not busy color palettes you saw in a lot of those sitcoms. Sid's part looks like it was taken from the Girl video, and in this video, Kaytranada plays the role of the prince's assistant, who later sets the girl up with the prince so he helps her find her one. And like I said, You're the One went viral, it was everywhere, and people were already listening to other Kaytranada songs at the time, so eyes were on 99.9%, and it did receive positive reviews. I don't know how to describe this any better than I'm about to, but I think another thing that makes Kaytranada's music so addictive is that you can feel how intuitive it is. You know there's definitely practice, honing of the craft there, especially considering he's self-taught, but I think you can genuinely tell when a producer listens to a lot of music, loves music, or when a songwriter actually listens to songs and reads other lyrics, kind of like that conversation that people were having about whether Millie Bobby Brown admitting to not watching many movies, whether that actually affects the roles that she picks. And I found in a Pitchfork review, they actually gave this album an 8, by the way, that Kay's own father said that listening to this album and his music overall, you could feel Haiti in his music, probably in part because his dad raised him on a lot of that music as well as other sounds. Another song that I really love on this album is called Bullets, which features Little Dragon.
And we all know why.
And they're always fun, they're always a little weird. And it's a quicker song based around this rolling drum and cymbal, and you feel like you're trudging through that haze of life that's being described. You know, wanting something fun, wanting something exciting to happen, but also sometimes wondering if that's even possible when everything in the world seems dark. But as jaded as the lyrics feel, you can't help but dance to this song, you know, Bouncy Knee at least, because it's not a song that's saying pack it up and give up, just one that acknowledges it can be hard to be positive all the time with so much conflict in the world, in your own life even. So here's a little boost. I think I also like this album because aside from dancing or driving to these songs, they also work very well to study to, because obviously they have lyrics, but because they're more house or dance based, a lot of the lyrics are more hooky than you listening to a whole narrative, but also because of that very stable, constant beat. It kind of keeps you in the rhythm, the flow of studying and focusing, at least for me. And for his work on 99.9%, Kaytranada earned the 2016 Polaris Music Prize, which is awarded to the best full-length Canadian album, based alone on artistic merit. So genre, popularity, sales, none of that matters. And I've actually interviewed the 2023 winner, Debbie Friday. It's a cool prize. You get exposure, of course, but also money to put back into your career, or do whatever you want with, I'm sure. And Kaytranada wouldn't release another album until 2019's Bubba, which has features from artists like Duran Bernard, Masego, and Caliucci. This is another album you can definitely dance to for sure and study to, you know, if you're like me. Honestly, I put this whole album on to work on this video. There are some more chill tracks in here like the opener, Do It. I know Kate was inspired by Andre 3000. This song is always specifically given like a class of 3000 vibe to me. And honestly, across the album, I do think you hear the Andre inspiration here more than on 99.9%. And when it came to making Bubba, Kaytra had a completely different approach this time with the collaborations. With 99.9%, he made the beats first, then sent them to the artist he wanted on them, and they'd add their verses, their spin to what he'd already made and send it back. But with Bubba, he had the artist in the studio with him, so they were able to make the song together. And because of this, while Kaytranada's presence is so obvious, the tracks sound more tailored to the artist, to the point where maybe you don't listen to Amon, Amari, or Sir, but you can get a feel for the type of music that they make. And I'm sure this probably also helped him expand his sound more. Not that he couldn't do it himself, but usually it's easier to have more influence from someone else on something if they're doing it with you, so they're actively giving their own feedback, and you do have to make yourself compromise just a little bit, rather than falling back into your old habits or your comfort zone.
Because me, it's like remotely, like I don't see their working process. I don't see that.
Do you prefer it that way than being in the room?
I prefer it that way, honestly.
Wow. Most people I talk to, they love to be in the room to vibe and to create something face to face and see
Yeah.
it and see the situation.
That's the thing. That's what's happening like today in the industry. Now it's more of like being present and being in a studio session. And me, it's not that I hate it, but sometimes it depends with the collaborator.
And even with these artists who have their own flavor as a producer, you can hear that give and take. Bubba ends with Midsection, which is a Pharrell collab, and Pharrell does the vocals, of course. There are still those percussive claps. The song is anchored around this sort of knocking drum, but infused with that breeziness, funk, and guitar that you'd expect on a Pharrell track.
People have sounds, but not many people have a thing that they know how to make you feel every time you hear their music. I don't know what that word is. That's why I was kind of like at a loss, but you have it like when you hear your beat. I know, and I always ask like, who did that? And they'll say Kaytranada. I'm like, of course. It makes you say, of course,
Yeah.
because there's some signature things that you're doing, and it's not formulaic.
Kaytranada is no stranger to funk either, but I think the difference here is like Kaytranada's is more anchored and weighty, and Pharrell's got this like lighter floatiness to his music I feel you can hear. And like I was saying, Midsection is a perfect 50-50 collab. The lyrics are very Pharrell too, with him being so awed by a lady's midsection, so he's suddenly able to forget about his problems because he's on the dance floor hypnotized by the booty. And I was already going to say the song's outro, which is how Bubba itself ends, sounds quintessentially Kaytranada with that brass and percussion, but I found out that it's meant to sound like Haitian dance music, so it's a nod to that, so even more Kaytranada than I initially thought. And Kaytranada was shortlisted for the 2020 Polaris Prize for his work on Bubba, though he didn't win. He was also nominated for Best New Artist at the 2021 Grammys, winning awards for Best Dance Recording and Best Dance Electronic Album. Absolutely nuts. He's the first Black and openly gay producer to win in the latter category. It's dance music. And something I noticed on both of these album covers, there's something weird being done or abstracted with the eyes. The 99.9% cover, which is drawn by Ricardo Cavolo, shows a lot of things going on in this colorful, kind of trippy portrait of Kaytranada. He said about creating it, "The process was really easy. He gave a few points to talk about, but the rest was total freedom for me. I think that's the best way for me to do my best, and I think all of us are happy with that art." And I'm not sure what specific pointers Kaytranada gave, but looking at other work of Ricardo's, the multiple eyes is definitely a motif of his. In a lot of these drawings, the irises of some of the pairs of the eyes are colorful, and others the eyes are glassy, probably meant to show the effects of drugs, some substance, maybe even just some emotion, some hope, some delusion as compared to the normal eyes. In some of the drawings, one pair is even wearing glasses, so I'm taking this to represent multiple states or versions of oneself, seeing the world through different sets of eyes or lenses at different points, be it drugs, depression, sobriety, bifocals. All three sets of the eyes on the 99.9% cover are wide open, unimpaired, unassisted. And I think this relates back to Kaytranada saying he finally felt good days were ahead, so he didn't feel like he needed to run or hide from anything anymore. That being said, I've always hated looking at the Bubba cover. Nothing has changed. Eyes are not my thing. I don't like the double pupil. It weirds me out a lot. But I was definitely curious to know if there was a meaning beyond why it looks like this weird. I couldn't find anything concrete, which is annoying. So a lot of the results I got were just on why Kaytranada made Bubba. And most of them point to him discussing his life in the midst of his fame increasing, his sexuality, and, just trying to grow as an artist in the way that he wanted to. And he told Zane Lowe that his album is named after Bubba Kush. We don't be doing all that to your eyes, but maybe it's just like a nod to things being a little distorted because of the Bubba, which he did say inspired a lot of this album. And then maybe that parallels with still dealing with your fame and other things you thought you kind of mastered emotionally. I've seen that there is or was a filter for these eyes, and I've also seen pictures of Kaytranada with them. I'm not sure if they were edits or just contacts he was wearing while performing. But again, no concrete answer here, and to be honest, it could just be purely aesthetic. And though he doesn't only want to be known for them, but like I've also hinted at, Kaytranada's collaboration resume is impressive. And I just mentioned recently that he did a Don't Forget About Us remix for Mariah Carey to celebrate the anniversary of the emancipation of Mimi. I did not know that there was a Kaytranada Wildside remix. This is the best news that I've come across all week. It's not as housey, but to me it amps up that R&B feel but makes it danceable and adds some Afro beats, I think, even. Which to me blends really well with the synths. And it doesn't take that sensual, alluring tone that's basically essential to Wildside out of the song, but rather kind of just brightens that mood. Like, this might just be a song that makes sense for a more public function-based flirtation now. And speaking of, that is one of the best things about Kaytra's music. You want to party to it, and even if you can't, it still feels like a little dopamine rush, a pick-me-up. So it makes sense. A lot of people are like, yeah, I love his music for the spring or summertime. It's when we tend to be around more people, or at least usually just feel a little happier because the sun is starting to shine more, plants are blooming again, and you're just kind of like, ooh, new beginnings. And also, he's a DJ, so I'm sure festival season also plays a role in some people associating Kaytra more with the summertime. And I think a lot of his music could definitely fit into the recession pop conversation. Honestly, even before it became a conversation, considering he's one of the faces of modern house music. And even lyrically, several of his songs talk about forgetting those financial troubles, oppression, discrimination, bullets in midsection being examples I've already mentioned. Or even if you can't forget those problems entirely, just finding relief and dancing through them. And for example, that main verse in midsection reads, "I'm feeling this new vibration, and it's taken over your nation. For all those oppressed and statesmen, you need an MDMA vacation. I used to see a thing, this is my confession, but she's a queen and her body's a blessing. One day they'll convene to teach mankind a lesson."
Cause right now I see power when I see her midsection move.
And I think aside from them being good, that's why people are super into a lot of Kaytranada's older songs like You're the One Again. Like, very timely, but you feel like you're being related to, but not necessarily preached to. And I'm like, do I even need to mention how much I love All Right Again? Oh, well, I did. And though the collaborations are frequent, Kaytranada's only joint album is 2023's Kaytranade, obviously with Amine. I don't know if I ever got fully into this album, but I have heard Forever because it's the lead single and it is so fun. Amine's music is usually fun.
Y'all switch your sides like Stacey Dash. Pride is the cost, you could price the tag. But for 45 minutes,
And they actually also worked with Pharrell on this album, having him do some of the production and the vocals, and he is on Forever. And again, the process for this album overall is also kind of cool. Kaytra made the beats during the day, and then Amine would listen to them and write the lyrics at night. And Amine said working with Kaytranada actually pushed his capabilities, and he thought, at least at the time, that some of his best raps were actually on this Kaytranade album. And they'd actually met before back in 2014 because Amine remixed one of Kaytranada's songs, and Kaytranada heard it and reached out. So kind of similar to what's happened to him. Another track I love on this album is Sauce It Up, which I sought out when I was getting into Amare.
She left him 'cause I'm finna sauce up.
I feel like we up on the replay. You
Timeless, of course, is Kaytranada's most recent album, which came out last summer. I've talked about it a couple times already because it produced Weird, which is one of my favorite songs from last year. I mean, it's still a bop. And again, this album does have those typical Kaytra beats. I think Snap My Fingers is an addictive example. But again, you get several soundscapes. So honestly, this album is as like boundless as it is timeless. Something I didn't know is that apparently a lot of people didn't like Timeless when it came out because it doesn't sound like traditional Kaytranada, which I think is probably meaning it's not an album full of those percussive house beats and synths as, you know, present as they are. All the way back in 2020, he told GQ that the Kaytranada sound was something he was doing at the time, yes, but it was one of multiple sounds, and the one that just became the most popular. He explained, I don't think I've changed my sound, I just think it evolved. It just got better and better. People still want that old sound. I understand, but people evolve. And though Timeless wouldn't come out for a few more years after he said this, the songs are mostly recorded in 2021, so pretty soon after he actually made this statement. Returning to the eyes of it all, even on the Timeless cover, Kaytranada's eyes stick out against that mostly black bottom 2/3 of the album cover. I do think it suits the darker kind of haunting vibes of a lot of these tracks, and a lot of these to me lean more R&B, especially looking at the collaborators, but I think that makes sense based on what he said about his music. And I was like, oh my goodness, not Kaytranada being just like me. There's a song on this album called Stepped On, and Kaytranada's singing on it, making Timeless the first album where he stepped into the role of vocalist. The Weeknd was meant to be on the song, and I do think you can hear the song was intended for him, but Kaytranada just liked his voice so much on the track that he kept it for himself. I don't think he was saying this about The Weeknd, so I'm not sure why he started singing this song. It could have been to send a demo, not sure. But in the interview where he mentions this, he says he started trying singing because he would send beats to artists and they wouldn't get back in time, so then he'd be convinced that everyone hated him. And he has said that quite a few big quote-unquote collaborations have fallen through. Like, for example, he was asked to work on Drake's Honestly Nevermind album, and apparently he was just like, yeah, I'm down, great, that sounds cool, but because he did not express enough excitement to be on the project, that's why that offer was never followed up with. And he was like, what do you want me to do, a backflip? And then there was a situation with his remix for Beyonce's Cuff It that resulted in a little bit of internet drama, and Kaytranada was trying to negotiate with Beyonce's team a deal to actually officially release his remix for Cuff It. And he had said, sometimes people don't see your worth and how important you are. I know what I mean to people. And people said that he was shading Beyonce, dragging her, things like that. And he was kind of like, no, I didn't drag her. It didn't release. The deal wasn't something that I wanted to agree to. We've worked together since. I've worked with her on tour. We're fine. I didn't know that Justine Skye still made music, but it seems like she took a decade off after Collide and what I was reading, maybe some label issues, and then she came back with an album in 2023. She and Kaytranada collaborated for their most recent single, Ooh La La, which came out at the end of May. I didn't know Justine was Jamaican, so I think it makes sense that you can hear that sort of Afro-Caribbean influence, and maybe it's even a reason that she wanted to work with Kaytranada, you know, aside from him making good-ass dance music. Ooh La La is one of those dance floor ready songs about a person. You swore you would quit, but you know, oh well, we're here now. It's a pretty common theme for summertime songs when it's warm and you're reckless, and this is definitely the vibe here. And this quote that Justine gave about the song, it was like almost too perfect, and to me it describes a lot of Kaytranada's music to a T. It's about chasing happiness through movement. After going through so much emotionally, I hit a point where I just wanted to feel good again. For me, that happened on the dance floor, being carefree with like-minded people, whether in Brooklyn, LA, or Ibiza. I wanted to make music that matched that energy. Something sexy, something free, something that lets you forget everything but the moment you're in. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can stick around for more. Also, if you'd like to become a channel member and get early access to videos, the link is in the description. And again, thank you so very much for watching. I love you all so very much, and we'll see you so very soon. Bye-bye.